This week's US CQM Forecast Alert is the signs of economic recovery has vanished. Column is the birth of the current quarter model. Lessons from Professor Lawrence R. Klein. The focus of this week's CQM forecast is that April export prices, services CPI, and PPI of final demand for goods all significantly exceeded ADIMA's forecast. Meanwhile, April IP also significantly exceeded ADIMA's forecast. Following the update of April CPI and retail sales, the PCE price deflator was significantly revised up from 4.39% to 5.54%, and real PCE was revised downward from minus 0.16% to minus 0.85%. The main reasons for this were a slowdown in retail sales at gas stations and a sharp rise in services CPI. The export price deflator for goods was significantly revised from 11.0% to 27.1%. Because April export prices far exceeded the ADIMA forecasts. The substantial increase in nominal goods export is due to the fact that export prices are used as explanatory variables in the ADIMA estimation for goods export. This is because there is approximately a 1-month time lag between the release of trade statistics and import-export price statistics. The April PPI of final demand for goods far exceeded ADIMA's forecast, leading to a substantial downward revision of inventory changes in both manufacturing and wholesale industries through inventory valuation adjustment. The downward revision of inventory change in retail industry is due to March retail inventories falling below ADIMA forecast. As a result, the idea that inflation would peak on May 1st was easily disproven, and it became clear that inflation was accelerating again. As a result, the economic growth rate was revised downward significantly to minus 0.70% on the expenditure side and minus 1.21% on the income side. In particular, the downward revision of the economic growth rate on the income side was influenced by a large increase in the GDP deflator. IP grew by 0.68% in April, far exceeding ADIMA's forecast of 0.06%. This had a major impact on real GDP forecast by PCA. The PCA revised its real GDP forecast upward to 2.26% because the impact of April IP on real GDP was much larger than the other economic indicators, affecting negatively on real GDP. Meanwhile, inflation appears to be accelerating again. Based on this week's CQM forecast, we can draw the following 5 conclusions. This week's column is titled The Birth of the CQM. Lessons from Professor Lawrence R. Klein. The CQM is based on the idea of automatically adjusting the constant term so that the model matches the current economic growth rate. I still remember Professor Klein saying, "Wouldn't it be fascinating if investors changing trade at Grand Central could see today's GDP growth rate on a scrolling display?" He always kept his focus on reality. To identify the economy's true growth rate, Professor Klein attempted to measure economic growth simultaneously from the expenditure, income, and production sides of the economy. Professor Klein introduced the PCA approach instead of a production side approach. I would never forget how, while conducting CQM forecast, Professor Klein repeatedly emphasized economists must speak about the economy through their own empirical analysis. This slide contains additional information about this week's detailed CQM forecast.